A very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi. You're watching a special broadcast of top stories from our studios here in the National Capital Region. And like always, an expansive list of stories for all of you to cover. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is your one-stop shop to understand and catch the news pulse of the day. We will be telling you about some climate change stories, news and updates from the world of entertainment and sports, what's happening in various presidential and parliamentary elections around the world. That's going to be our focus as well. But first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, shifting our focus to the 70th day of the West Asian conflict between Israel and Hamas. Latest from the war front on your screens next. The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being. Now, the war between Israel and Hamas has entered its 70th day. Let's get you the latest update from the war front on your screens first. The Israeli Defense Forces says that 70 Hamas gunmen have surrendered at northern Gaza hospital. It has also aired footage of the surrendering of the arms and weapons. We'll tell you all about it. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has apparently placed a bounty on Hamas leaders, $400,000 for any information on Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Israel continues attacks on the Hamas sites across the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, United States President Joe Biden has urged Israel to be, quote-unquote, more careful, to save and protect Gazans and the civilian lives. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he has told senior U.S. official that Israel will, on the other hand, continue to fight Hamas until absolute victory is achieved. Already, the difference in opinions and the change and shift in diplomatic stands and paradigm shift is coming out in the open. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Benjamin Netanyahu discuss the war in Gaza. National Security Advisor also exclaiming that the ground offensive has to be lowered in intensity. Now, like I mentioned before, the IDF has released footage of Palestinian gunmen, they're calling them Hamas operatives, surrendering at the Kamal Adwan hospital in northern Gaza. Take a look at this. Israeli troops, in collaboration with the Shin Bet security agency, engaged and defeated Hamas operatives in the hospital area. They've also corroborated the same on their Telegram channel. According to the IDF, approximately 70 Hamas members surrendered, handing over weapons and equipment as well. Now, they are now undergoing interrogation by the Shin Bet and the Military Intelligence Directorate's Unit 504. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has reportedly placed a bounty on Hamas leaders. They dropped flyers across the Gaza Strip offering money for any information on the whereabouts of Yahya Sinwar and other commanders of the terror group. Images of the pamphlets are circulating on social media. The pamphlet promises financial incentives, including $400,000 for details on Yahya Sinwar, $300,000 for his brother Muhammad Sinwar, $200,000 for Rafa Salameh, and $100,000 for Muhammad Dief. Now, the flyer contains a telephone number as well, as you can see on your screens, and a contact on the Telegram messaging app with the IDF promising confidentiality for anyone who chooses to furbish any kind of information on these Hamas operatives. Now, take a look at this drone footage. It has again emerged and shown the people, the construction damage, the devastation, people looking for their loved ones beneath damaged structures. All of this following Israeli airstrikes in southern Gaza. Survivors and locals, as you can see on this drone footage, can be seen amidst the debris, searching for any signs of life or salvageable belongings. Israeli forces have besieged the coastal strip completely, causing extensive destruction. Palestinian health officials have confirmed nearly 19,000 casualties, most of them children, with fears of thousands more trapped beneath the rubble. Meanwhile, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shatayyeh has asserted that international demands for the Palestinian Authority to revamp leadership and intensify reforms divert the focus from the essential requirement of a political vision for post-Gaza war peace. In a Reuters interview, Shatayyeh urged international involvement to resolve the long-standing conflict, expressing disappointment with the United States for not employing its regional influence effectively.
After for all of the Palestinian territories. What we need is to see an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the materialization and manifestation of a two-state solution. The issue is give us a political horizon. We need American measures to support the two states. That's what they are saying. So the issue for us is not, whether we reform the health sector or we reform local government sector or this and that and so. That's not the issue. The issue for us is that Palestinians have been suffering for 75 years. And nobody, the people who talk about two-state solution, okay, the two-state solution has become like international anthem. It's just people, they need measures on the ground. That is the thing. This is a paradox that should not be there. So United States can put serious pressure on the Israelis. United States can tell Israel to stop the war. Today what is needed is for the United Nations Security Council to say with a very clear timetable that this Israeli occupation that has occurred on the Palestinian territories since 1967 should end, and this is the timetable that should be given to the Israelis, to the Palestinians, to end this conflict. What we need from the United States really is some sort of implementable measures. We need Washington to walk the walk, not only to talk the talk. So therefore, there are so many measures that Washington can do, but has not been doing. So therefore, the only country that can deliver Israel is the United States, and very unfortunately, they are not doing the work. Our people are starving. Those who might escape bombardments might be dying from hunger and starvation. Those who might make it out of starvation, they're dying of their wounds. So there is no medical supplies, there is no food.
Now, even as Israel continues to pound the Gaza Strip, its closest ally, the United States, is increasingly sounding a divergent stand. Washington's envoy was in Tel Aviv to discuss how its ally could better protect Palestinian civilians in its war on Hamas terrorists. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about possibly transitioning to what the White House called lower intensity military operations in the Gaza Strip.
As Israel pounded the Gaza Strip on Thursday, Washington's envoy was in Tel Aviv to discuss how its ally could better protect Palestinian civilians in its war on Hamas militants. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and spoke with other officials, including the country's defense minister, about possibly transitioning to what the White House called lower-intensity military operations in Gaza. Here's White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby.
One of the things that Jake did talk to him about was progress in the war and where the Israelis think it's going to go. He did talk about possible transitioning from what we would call high-intensity operations, which is what we're seeing them do now, to lower-intensity operations sometime, in the near future. But I don't want to put a timestamp on it. I think you can understand that the last thing we'd want to do is telegraph to Hamas what they're likely to face in coming weeks and months.
At an event in Bethesda, Maryland, Reuters asked U.S. President Joe Biden if he wanted Israel to scale back its assault on Gaza by the end of the year.
I want them to be focused on how to save civilian lives, not stop going after Hamas, but be more careful.
Meanwhile, in the Rafah area of southern Gaza, dozens of wounded people were taken to the hospital on Thursday after an Israeli airstrike targeted a house. Paramedics said 6 were killed in the airstrike and dozens were injured, including women and children. Israel launched its campaign in retaliation for a rampage by Hamas, whose fighters killed 1,200 Israelis and seized 240 hostages in a cross-border raid on October 7th. Since then, Israeli forces have bombarded the coastal strip and laid much of it to waste, with nearly 19,000 people confirmed dead according to Palestinian health officials, and thousands more feared buried under the rubble.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he affirmed Israel's commitment to continue the conflict against Hamas until absolute victory. During a meeting with White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Netanyahu discussed regional threats, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and Houthis in Yemen, the release of hostages held by Hamas, and the ongoing humanitarian aid for Gaza's civilian population.
I met today with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. I greatly appreciate the U.S. support for Israel in the supply of munitions for the Israeli army, in blocking the attempts at the UN to stop the fighting, and in the assistance in returning our hostages. I would like to clarify, the return of our hostages is the main goal. We are not relenting in our efforts even for a moment, even at this moment. I told our American friends, our heroic soldiers have not fallen in vain. Out of the deep pain of their having fallen, we are more determined than ever to continue fighting until Hamas is eliminated, until absolute victory.
And taking a look at some other top global developments, China has said that the Indian Supreme Court's verdict on Article 370, upholding the centre's decision to carve out the Union territory of Ladakh from the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, does not have any bearing on its claim on the western section of the China-India border. India's Supreme Court unanimously upheld the central government's decision to abrogate provisions of Article 370 bestowing special status to the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, the apex court also upheld the validity of the centre's decision to carve out the Union territory of Ladakh from the erstwhile state of J&K and directed restoration of statehood at the earliest, as well as holding elections to the assembly by September 30 next year. Meanwhile, developments in another neighboring country, the Maldives, under President Mohammad Muizzu's leadership, has chosen not to renew an agreement with India for a hydrographic survey. This just a month after requesting the withdrawal of Indian military personnel as well. Now, this shift follows the government's India Out campaign, and the agreement, signed back in 2019, allowed India to survey Maldivian waters. According to a report in the Indian Express, the Maldives government, in charge since November, has informed India of its decision not to renew the pact. This move marks the termination of the first bilateral agreement under the new administration, officially concluding on the 7th of June 2024.
Would you mind doing another layer, please?
Well, time for us here to slip into a quick break. But meanwhile, COP28, a landmark agreement, a phasing out of fossil fuels that's likely to happen by 2050. Meanwhile, India has set its own goals by going net zero emissions by the year 2070. Here's a promo, take a look, and we'll be back for more.
वर्ष 2070 तक भारत नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य हासिल करेगा.
There is certainly a wall of capital coming into the clean tech, climate tech space, not just in India but across the world.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. You're watching News 9 Live. Let's take you across some global developments. Donald Trump's election interference case in Washington is going to be put on hold while the former president further pursues his claims that he is immune from a prosecution. This, a judge also ruled on Wednesday. Now, the decision from United States' district judge raises the likelihood that Trump's trial on charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 election, currently scheduled for the 4th of March, will be postponed as the appeal of a legally untested argument wins through the courts. From the United States, cutting across to Taiwan, where the upcoming presidential and parliamentary elections in January have highlighted the generational rifts over the island's relationship with China.
As Taiwan prepares to vote in the presidential and parliamentary elections next month, polls reveal deep divisions between generations towards its relationship with China. At this government-run veterans' care home in northern Taiwan, this former soldier's chest tattoo of the island's flag carries the complexities of those ties. Wang Zhiquan, who is 93, joined the Chinese army when he was only 13 and holds tragic memories of war.
I still dare not watch the news when I watch TV. War is cruel and cold. When I started serving as a soldier, people were forced to enlist during the civil war between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party. When they couldn't catch adults, they would catch children.
Defeated in the Chinese Civil War, the nationalist Kuomintang government fled to Taiwan 7 decades ago, but no peace treaty was ever signed to end the war. China's communist government has since been pushing for what it calls reunification with Taiwan and has ramped up its military pressure against the island in the past few years, stoking fears of a war that could drag in the United States. Those tensions are dominating election campaigns in the run-up to Taiwan's January 13th ballot. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party champions the island's separate identity from China. But despite moving to Taiwan and later fighting for its island of Kinmen, Wang's sense of identity remains tied to China.
Taiwan is a part of China. It has been since the Qing and Ming dynasties.
It's a view shared by many from his generation, like fellow care home resident Sun Guoxi. The 110-year-old veteran believes his current government is being provocative. He warns that if a conflict breaks out, the island would be no match for China. Yet their views conflict with mainstream Taiwan, who overwhelmingly view themselves as Taiwanese and not Chinese, according to polls. He is political scientist Song Wen-ti.
There is certainly a generational shift. The older generation was a lot more likely to be for unification, and the younger generation a lot less likely. The younger people tend to have a separate, almost distinct Taiwanese national identity as opposed to a more Chinese national identity. So in that sense, the trend lines on support for unification is a downward one, less and less support for unification over time.
The main opposition party, the pro-China KMT, has cast the election as a choice between war and peace, a line Beijing has echoed. But as campaigning heats up, some in Taiwan are hoping to mend rifts rather than further the divide. As this 22-year-old says, we can only try our best to understand the others and learn why they might have certain ideas. Even if we can't agree with each other, as humans, we should still be able to talk normally.
Moving on, shifting our focus to the Russia-Ukraine war as well, as US-made F-16 fighter jets for Ukraine arrive at training centers in the United States and Europe. Kyiv's allies hope the modern aircraft can push Russian planes farther from the front lines, target radar transmitters more effectively, and hunt down more cruise missiles.
American F-16 fighter jets set for Ukraine are making their way to training centers in the United States and Europe, as Kyiv's allies hope the modern warplane can push Russian jets further from the front lines and change the shape of the battlefield from the air. The F-16 will replace Ukraine's strained and thinning fleet of the Soviet-designed MiG-29s and other jets dated back to days of the Cold War. They have advanced radar and their weapons boast greater range and may allow Ukraine to better Russian air defense systems. Western military officials and experts also say the F-16s will help Kyiv integrate with Western allies and break Ukraine's reliance on aging hardware built by its enemy. Training enough pilots and support crew to operate the new fleet will take months. 8 pilots and 65 support personnel are in the first stages of learning how to operate the F-16 in Denmark. Others are in Arizona and Romania. Although the exact number of aircraft has not been disclosed, experts expect it to be in the dozens. Kelly Greco, a senior fellow at the Stimson Center, adds that air combat training would be next, with 6 to 8 weeks of instruction. Air-to-ground training would last another 2 months. A Ukraine Air Force spokesperson said he did not expect the jets to operate in Ukraine until 2024. Russia has warned against delivering F-16s to Ukraine, with its ambassador to Denmark saying in August that doing so would be, quote, an escalation of the conflict.
Meanwhile, European leaders gathered in Brussels on Thursday for a high-stakes summit on Ukraine accession. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is blocking both EU membership talks and giving 50 billion euros in financial aid for Kiev from the European Union budget, much to the exasperation of his EU partners at a crucial time for Ukraine. Take a look at this next report.
This is a historic moment.
In a major political win for Kyiv, European Union leaders agreed on Thursday to start membership talks with Ukraine. EU diplomats and officials said it was unexpected and that the green light came as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who had for weeks said he would block a deal, agreed to leave the room knowing the vote would go ahead. Such an unusual way to approve a decision, especially such a major one, is unheard of in Brussels. Orban confirmed that he had abstained from the vote on what he called a bad decision.
Mr. Orban was very well aware of the decision that was going to be made.
Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo.
The message that is given is a very clear message. We are on the side of the Ukrainians who are fighting for our freedom, who are fighting for respect of their country. And the message to Moscow is also a very clear one. We will not be intimidated. The European unity is there, and we are on the side of the Ukrainians, even at the most difficult moments.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the move in a social media post, writing, "History is made by those who don't get tired of fighting for freedom." The European Council also decided on Thursday to open accession negotiations with Moldova, grant EU candidate status to Georgia, and also advance a bid by another hopeful, Bosnia and Herzegovina. For Ukraine, the talks themselves are likely to take years. The decision comes at a time when Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russia's invasion has failed to make major gains, and U.S. military aid has become more uncertain.
Meanwhile, Finland officially reopened its border after a temporary closure as the first buses departed from St. Petersburg late evening on the 13th of December. The shutdown lasted a month, which was aimed to curb a spike in refugee arrivals from Russia. Nearly 900 asylum seekers had entered Finland in November, prompting that particular closure. The move was allegedly linked to Moscow's displeasure with Finland's increased defense cooperation with the United States. Notably, passengers crossing the reopened border expressed relief and happiness. Listen in.
Я очень рада, что открыли границу, что мы все теперь можем спокойно ездить, и есть эта возможность видеться с родственниками, с близкими, и они могут приезжать к нам и навещать нас тоже.
News coming in from Bulgaria, where in Sofia, the dismantling of a 70-year-old Soviet monument has begun amid controversy. The monument to the Soviet army, erected back in 1954, which was symbolized victory over fascism and decades of communist rule. While considered structurally unsafe, the removal fulfills a promise by the newly elected mayor. Many support relocation to a museum, but opposition, including pro-Moscow groups, they want a referendum. The park, which are often painted with various colors, has cultural significance. Despite concerns about erasing history, authorities press on sparking criticism from Russia. The dismantling has slated for a month and aims for completion by Christmas end, with figures preserved in a socialist art museum. Moving on, Britain, Japan and Italy have signed an international treaty to establish a program aimed at developing an advanced fighter jet. Now, the three nations' defense ministers announced the same on Thursday.
Britain, Japan and Italy have agreed a deal to build a new generation of fighter jet. Defence ministers from the three nations signed the accord in Tokyo on Thursday. That sets in motion the Global Combat Air Programme. An early mock-up of the plane has previously been shown off by UK defence giant BAE Systems. The programme is intended to create a next-generation stealth combat aircraft capable of defeating the latest jets from Russia or China. Officials say its radar will provide 10,000 times more information than current systems. Speaking in Tokyo, British Defence Minister Grant Shapps said the need for the new jet was clear.
The risks and problems from Europe to the Indo-Pacific are clear for all to see. And so it is enormously important that we join together across our nations to produce this kind of security for our skies.
The new plane is meant to be in service by 2035. Development efforts will be headquartered in the UK, with the first chief executive for the project to come from Japan. Besides BAE, major firms involved include Italy's Leonardo and UK jet engine maker Rolls-Royce. Reuters has previously reported that Japanese firms including Mitsubishi Heavy Industries will also play a big role. The parliaments of each country must now ratify the agreement.
Now, the United States is working to create a comprehensive maritime coalition in the Red Sea to safeguard ships and send a clear message to Yemen's Houthi rebels against further attacks. The move comes as the Houthis, aligned with Iran, have targeted vessels and launched drones and missiles during the Israel-Hamas war. Now, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, he mentioned talks about a maritime task force to ensure safe passage in the Red Sea. Iran has cautioned that such a force would face extraordinary problems. United States' Special Envoy for Yemen, Tim Lenderking, he aims to expand an existing naval task force into a multinational coalition to deter Houthi threats to international shipping. The U.S. is engaging in active assessments to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, the United States plans to limit Houthis' threat. Well, time for a quick commercial break. News and updates continue on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
Since the last 2 years, Khalistani terror groups are threatening Indian diplomats in Canada, US, UK and Australia. Investigations of these threats led us to the first ever abduction and killing of an Indian diplomat, Ravindra Matre, in UK's Birmingham in 1984. Our months-long investigation finally led us to the murderer of Ravindra Matre, who has been hiding in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir for the last 40 years. Watch our exclusive documentary, Murder of an Indian Diplomat, where we reveal the man who killed Ravindra Matre.
Stop searching, start streaming. Download the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
The scale of the attack was something that we were surprised at. David Hadley was a double agent. The Americans did not want him to be fully exposed, so all that he probably shared with the Americans was not shared with us in terms of intelligence. If we had that, I'm sure that we would have been able to deal with the situation far better.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now. China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. This and more. Streaming on the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Today, she is the only smiling leader in Rajasthan. All eyes will be on her moves if the BJP returns to power.
Vasundhara Raje Scindia defied all the odds to become the first woman chief minister of Rajasthan.
She has the uncanny ability of striking rapport with all sections. That's why she is very popular in her constituency, not only in her constituency but in entire Rajasthan.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. You're watching News9 Live. Our updates from the world of sports, climate change and entertainment continues. And take a look at this. An Australian mother, Kathleen Folbig, has been cleared of killing her 4 children after 2 decades behind the bars. The New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal overturned her convictions based on new scientific discoveries, leading to an unconditional pardon back in June. The case highlights the evolving role of science in the pursuit of justice.
An Australian mother has been cleared of killing her 4 children after spending 2 decades behind bars. The New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal on Thursday overturned Kathleen Folbig's convictions following an unconditional pardon in June based on new scientific discoveries. Speaking to reporters outside the court in Sydney, the 56-year-old called on the legal system and society to think before accusing a parent of hurting their children.
I am grateful that updated science and genetics has given me answers as to how my children died. However, even in 1999, we had legal answers to prove my innocence. They were ignored and dismissed. The system preferred to blame me rather than accept that sometimes children can and do die suddenly, unexpectedly, and heartbreakingly.
Folbig's lawyer, Rahani Virgo, told reporters her legal team is preparing to seek compensation for the wrongful imprisonment, which would be, quote, bigger than any substantial payment that has been made before. Folbig was convicted in 2003 for the murder of her 3 children and manslaughter of a 4th. She had always maintained her innocence, saying her children had died of natural causes. In 2019, an initial inquiry into the case reaffirmed Folbig's guilt. But in 2022, a second inquiry found new evidence suggesting 2 of the children had a genetic mutation that may have caused their deaths. After the inquiry found a reasonable doubt for each conviction, New South Wales State Attorney General Michael Daly pardoned Folbig, releasing her from prison in June this year.
Meanwhile, Pope Francis on Thursday called for an international treaty to ensure artificial intelligence is developed and used ethically, arguing that the risks of technology lacking human values of compassion, mercy, morality and forgiveness are far too great to turn a blind eye. Francis added his voice to increasing calls for binding global regulation of artificial intelligence in his annual message for the World Day of Peace, which the Catholic Church celebrates every year on the 1st of January. The Vatican released the text of the message on Thursday. Meanwhile, in Poland, the youth is pinning high hopes on the new Donald Tusk government. After 8 years of conservative Polish government, young voters hope the centre-left coalition will revive democracy. They expect Tusk government to strengthen relations with the European Union and aspire reforms in a variety of areas.
Monika Horno-Cieślak is 34 years old and has become the new ombudswoman for children's rights in Poland. After 8 years of rule by a conservative government, a group of centre-left parties has come together to form a new government in Poland. The new coalition aims to bring Poland closer to the European values, and Monica wants to be part of this change.
I'm glad that we've reached a new openness, that we can do a lot, that we have the opportunity to represent the voice of young people who showed us their voice at the parliamentary elections. Because let us remember that young people in Poland went to the polls in great numbers, and I hope that their voice will continue to be heard.
The new parliamentary majority in Poland stands proof that the votes of the youth count. The revival of the good relations with Brussels also plays a key role for the new government. Over recent years, Mikhail Wawrikowicz, lawyer and co-founder of the Free Courts Initiative, condemned the Conservative Law and Justice government's violations of the rule of law. Poland has been fined by the European Union over its controversial judicial reforms.
These courts confirmed that many areas of Polish judiciary and Polish rule of law was distracted by the government. So right now we are at the moment where the new government has an obligation to implement all of these judgments of the European courts and has to repair the rule of law in Poland, has to back the independence of judiciary and impartiality of Polish courts.
Over 11 million Poles voted for the three parties which make up the new coalition government. These voters are now hoping for reforms in a variety of areas. Monika Horno-Cieślak is aware of people's huge expectations. In addition to improving children's rights, climate protection and forging a tight cooperation with the European Union are her main goals.
As far as the relations with the EU are concerned, thinking in terms of protecting the rights of young people, it is important to deal with the climate issue, because here in Poland we have climate strikes organized by the youth. It is important to work out good solutions in this area, because I know that young people are very much counting on a dialogue with the EU and also on a dialogue with the Polish government.
The new Polish government now faces the huge task of not disappointing the majority of Poles who voted for them. One thing is for sure, Poland is facing major changes.
And next up, shifting our focus to our segment on climate change. But before that, let's understand how COP28 deal got done. In a historic move at the COP28 in Dubai, over 200 countries agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. Despite initial concerns, strategic diplomacy and collaboration paved the way for a groundbreaking global agreement.
We have now reached the end.
For the first time in history, countries have expressed a desire to end the oil age. The COP28 Accord from the summit in Dubai calls for transitioning away from fossil fuels. Key players, including conference president Sultan Al-Jaber, say it's historic.
You delivered.
This is a sea change moment.
I think this is a global turning point.
Some remain dissatisfied with concessions allowing for the use of tech such as carbon capture to keep greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. But striking a deal was by no means a foregone conclusion. Here's a look at how the COP28 deal got done.
I promised I would roll up my sleeves.
Before the conference, COP28 President Al-Jaber was pilloried by environmental activists as untrustworthy. He runs the United Arab Emirates state oil company. But he didn't want to oversee a failed conference. Before it started, his office pumped up climate initiatives, like an EU and US-led declaration by nations to triple renewable energy capacity by 2030.
The urgency of this moment is clear.
And a US-China cooperation agreement reached in November. Sources say getting a deal took deft maneuvering by the conference host, as well as back-channel diplomacy from the top envoys of the world's biggest polluters, the US and China. Al-Jaber intentionally stirred the pot, sources say. His approach was to put out deliberately provocative drafts for a deal that forced negotiators to reveal the outer limits of their positions. Then, find common ground. On December 11th, Al-Jaber's draft deal outlined a broad menu of options that countries could, not should, take to fight climate change. Those options ranged from carbon capture to reducing fossil fuel use or cutting subsidies. Missing was any mention of a phase-out. That sparked outrage, including from small island nations.
We will not sign our gift certificates. It is our very survival that is at stake.
While scores of countries came to Dubai wanting language around phasing out fossil fuels entirely, it was something oil group OPEC particularly opposed. But the outrage expressed at the summit was the desired effect, according to one source, who said the move made clear where people stood.
Mr. Kerry.
The presidency then took meetings into the early morning hours over the next days.
We're going to work.
What's going on?
And did not release an updated draft until December 13th, a day after the summit's scheduled end. The term phase out remained a red line that some like China and Saudi Arabia would never accept. So U.S. envoy John Kerry and his Chinese counterpart Xie Jinhua found a workaround. They already had a roadmap from their recent climate cooperation in November. Use words that essentially mean the same thing as phase out. With China and the U.S. aligned, it was just a matter of getting OPEC on board. One source said it was Kerry, China, and the Saudis that played a constructive role at the 11th hour. A source familiar with the negotiations said the final flurry of diplomacy ensured the deal would pass.
Meanwhile, talking about climate change, China is in the grip of a severe cold spell as it is experiencing heavy snowfall, disrupting transportation in various cities like Beijing. Meanwhile, the China Met administration, it has predicted a further 8 to 12 degrees Celsius drop in most regions over the next 2 days, with some areas, including central Inner Mongolia and northern Shaanxi, facing a plunge of more than 20 degrees Celsius. This extreme weather follows a year of climate extremes in China, from frigid temperatures in January to record rainfall and scorching summer heat, all attributed to the impacts of climate change. Meanwhile, in northeast Australia, tropical storm Jasper caused havoc with heavy rains, downing trees, cutting power lines and triggering evacuations. After hitting Queensland on the 13th of December as a Category 2 storm, it is now a tropical low heading northwest. The storm, now downgraded to a tropical low, was tracking in a northwesterly direction towards the Gulf of Carpentaria, where it could intensify back to a cyclonic strength over the weekend. This, according to Australia's Bureau of Met. Now, local residents also expressed their concerns over the aftermath of Cyclone Jasper. And news and stories from the world of sports, where in a latest race in Antarctica, Americans Stephanie Estridge and Michael Higgins secured victory in the Antarctic Ice Marathon. These racers and runners battling sub-zero temperatures near the South Pole, in which Estridge finished the marathon in 5 minutes and 4 seconds, conquering 3 continents in the marathon running. Now, while Higgins from Dallas, Texas won his first international marathon in just 4 minutes and 1 second, Americans triumphed at this particular event. But what's more important is the beauty of at what height this particular sport is being executed. Notably, both winners now join the elite club of marathon champions, etching their triumph in the challenging winds of Antarctic. Talking about global sport superstars, Lionel Messi's 6 jerseys from Argentina's victorious 2022 World Cup in Qatar and the entire run, they just wrapped up an auction, raking in a cool $7.8 million. Now that's big money, making it the priciest sports memorabilia sold at auction this year. Now, Sotheby's had their eyes set on over $10 million, but it fell just a bit short. Still, it is nothing to scoff at. For context, Michael Jordan's 1998 NBA Final jersey holds the record at a whopping $10.1 million from last year. Now, these sports, mementos, and their memorabilia sure pack a punch in the prize game.
We have 6 jerseys here that Messi wore during the 2022 FIFA World Cup, all the way from the group stages through the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and of course the match that everyone remembers, the finals against France, where 1.5 billion people were tuned into. The smell is something that we definitely have to consider, but at the same time, the collectors typically don't care one way or another. For certain athletes, it can actually be something that you consider when you're purchasing the jersey. But in this case, they all smell fine.
And from one global superstar to another, talking about jerseys, in a heartfelt tribute to former Indian captain MS Dhoni, the BCCI has decided to retire the iconic number 7 jersey, which is synonymous with Dhoni's incredible cricket journey. Similar to Sachin Tendulkar's number 10, Dhoni's jersey will be off limits for Indian players. This is a move honouring his remarkable contributions to the team. Youngsters and current players have been informed not to choose the number 7 shirt, reinforcing the BCCI's decision. The board presently designates around 60 numbers to the Indian team, ensuring a respectful acknowledgement of each player's jersey number, even if they're out of the team for a brief period. News and updates from the world of technology and AI. Tesla is recalling nearly all vehicles that were sold in the United States, which is more than 2 million. Well, to update software and fix a defective system that's supposed to ensure drivers are paying attention when using the autopilot feature.
Tesla is recalling just over 2 million vehicles in the United States. It's to install new safeguards for vehicles carrying its autopilot advanced driver assistance system. The electric vehicle giant made the move after a safety regulator said the system was open to foreseeable misuse. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, has investigated Tesla for more than 2 years. It wanted to know whether its vehicles adequately ensured drivers pay attention when using the driver assistance system. Tesla said in the recall filing that autopilot's software system controls may not be sufficient to prevent driver misuse and could increase the risk of a crash. Tesla's autopilot is intended to enable cars to steer, accelerate and brake automatically within their lane. Enhanced autopilot can assist in changing lanes on highways but does not make them autonomous. Tesla said it did not agree with the regulator's analysis, but added it would deploy an over-the-air software update. It said this will incorporate additional controls and alerts to those already existing on affected vehicles. The aim is to encourage the driver to stick to their continuous driving responsibility whenever auto steer is engaged. The company did not respond to a question on whether the recall would be performed outside the US. NHTSA opened a probe in 2021 into autopilot after identifying more than a dozen crashes in which Tesla vehicles hit stationary emergency vehicles. Its investigation into autopilot will remain open as it monitors Tesla's remedies.
And talking about gizmos, gadgets and the latest tech, scientists in Switzerland are studying if humans can control an additional robotic arm without affecting other tasks. The research aims to understand the nervous system and potentially aid applications like assistive devices for people with disabilities or stroke rehabilitation.
Scientists in Switzerland are testing whether humans can control an extra robotic arm without impacting our ability to do other things at the same time. Silvestro Macera is a professor and neuroengineer at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. The research was published in the peer-reviewed journal Science Robotics.
The main motivation is to understand the nervous system. Because if you challenge the brain to do something which is completely new, you will understand whether the brain is able to do that and how you can facilitate this learning. And then you can transfer this also to other applications, in particular, for example, for assistive devices with people with disability, rehabilitation after stroke, and these kind of things.
The researchers devised a system where someone wearing virtual reality goggles sees 3 arms, with the extra limb looking a little different to limit natural association. Volunteers held onto an exoskeleton which controlled the virtual left and right arms, while movement detected by a belt around their waist measured their breathing and controlled the middle arm. Giulia Dominigiani is a PhD student.
In particular, we use this environment to test our gaze respiration-based control interface. And as a first step, we decided to assess its actual feasibility for effective augmentation, so assessing the possibility of still speaking and gazing around.
The researchers also tested breathing control with a real robotic arm strapped to the user's chest that extends in and out with the diaphragm.
What was extremely interesting to see was that both trained participants and naive participants performed similarly, again showing the intuitiveness of our control interface.
Though it wasn't published in the study, senior scientist Sulaiman Shakur says the team also discovered that people could be trained to control a computer mouse with the muscles we don't really use anymore.
So these muscles that we have in our body, but through evolution we have lost their functionality. We have found that through a few days of training, people could use these auricular muscles, which are this muscle we have behind the ears, to control this extra limb while still using their natural arms and still speaking and looking around.
The study is part of a Swiss National Science Foundation project to develop a wearable robotic arm to assist in daily tasks or to help in search and rescue.
Meanwhile, shifting our focus to Christmas Advent celebrations and talking celebrations, Copenhagen's waterways have certainly come alive in a luminous spectacle as kayaks, adorned with radiant lights, celebrate the cherished tradition of Lucia Day, illuminating the city's scenic landscapes. And as Christmas approaches, Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry is reflecting the festival spirit. A Christmas Around the World exhibit has been set up representing holiday traditions from diverse cultures. A 4-story, 50-foot-tall grand Christmas tree stands amidst a forest of over 50 other smaller trees. The exhibit has a unique history dating back to 1942 during wartime, where communities sought solace and happiness at the museum. Now visitors, they shared their experience about the place, but the idea is about the small Christmas tree forest and the big tall one in the center, all depicting various cultures from around the world.
The great thing about this exhibition is it really showcases how alike we all are, especially during these times where we might have some differences, but at the end of the day, these trees are a beautiful canvas to show how we all celebrate our traditions around the globe at various times of the year.
Every year it's beautiful, and I've seen them many years, but they're still enchanting and there's still wonder left in it. And I love reading what each country does. You know, you learn something new every time.
And well, from the European Union becoming the first major power to regulate artificial intelligence, and Alphabet's Gemini boosting shares, aiming to compete with ChatGPT, to Elon Musk's XAI introducing the Grok chatbot as an alternative to big tech's censored products, to McDonald's adopting AI to make better burgers. Here are the biggest artificial intelligence stories from the past week. Take a look.
From a big deal in Brussels to how McDonald's thinks bots can help it make better burgers. This is Generation AI. After days of haggling, the EU reached a deal on how to regulate AI, including how governments use the technology. That makes the bloc the first major world power to move towards enacting rules on the tech. European Commissioner Thierry Breton thinks others will follow Europe's lead.
Europe has positioned itself as a pioneer, understanding the importance of its role as a global standard setter.
Alphabet shares soared after it launched Gemini, a new AI model that could help it close the gap with ChatGPT. The Google parent firm was long considered a leader in the sector, but lost that title when OpenAI's chatbot took the tech landscape by storm. Elon Musk's XAI has started rolling out its new Grok chatbot to some subscribers on X, his social network. The billionaire wants it to be an alternative to rival products made by big tech, which he says are riddled with censorship. McDonald's is using AI to keep a closer eye on its restaurants. The burger chain has partnered with Google Cloud to deploy the tech. It hopes AI will let it see what's going on in each store and help find cost savings. And chip giant AMD says the market for its AI processors will grow to $45 billion this year, with more to come. It says the market for such silicon could be close to 10 times that amount by 2027. The forecast came as AMD launched new chips meant to help it catch market leader NVIDIA.
Hello and welcome to News 9. I'm Varghese Abraham. First up, Bhajan Lal Sharma of the Bharatiya Janata Party takes oath as the new Chief Minister of Rajasthan today. We have two Deputy Chief Ministers as well who will be sworn in along with him, Diya Kumari as well as Prem Chand Bhairava. What we understand is that the ceremony is taking place. Prime Minister Modi, Home Minister Shah,